The crystalline walls of the Galactic Council chamber reflected light from 1,000 different angles, casting rainbow patterns across the assembled representatives of 300 species. Ambassador Minho Park stood in the center of the circular floor, his hands clasped behind his back, his face calm. Beside him, Ambassador Hajin Choi maintained the same composed posture, though her eyes tracked every movement in the room with the precision of someone who had spent decades commanding warships. This was humanity's third petition for council membership. The first two had been rejected without much discussion. Today felt different. The chamber was full, which meant the council was taking them seriously enough to show up. Whether that was good or bad remained to be seen. Chancellor Vexter rose from his elevated seat. The insectoid's chitinous body gleamed under the lights, and his four eyes focused on the humans below. His translator device rendered his clicking speech into something resembling standard galactic common. Humans of Earth, Vexter began, his voice carrying across the chamber. Your petition for council membership has been reviewed. Your technological achievements are noted. Your diplomatic overtures have been received. However, this council must consider more than mere capability. We must consider character. Minho felt Haijin tense beside him, but neither moved. They had prepared for this moment, run through dozens of scenarios. Stay calm. Let them speak. Learn what they really think. Senator Krell of the Drakkar Sovereignty stepped forward. The reptilian's scales shifted from green to dark red, a sign of aggression among his people. Let me speak plainly, humans. We have studied your history. We have observed your behavior for the past 50 years, since you achieved faster-than-light travel. And we have found you lacking. Lacking in what regard? Minho asked, his voice level. Warrior spirit? Krell's voice boomed. You negotiate when you should conquer. You discuss when you should dominate. You seek compromise when you should seek victory. In the 300 years of this council's existence, every member species has proven themselves through strength. Through conflict, through the willingness to fight for what they claim. Another representative spoke up, a tall, thin being covered in silver fur. Your species has not engaged in a single territorial war since achieving spaceflight. Not one. You encountered the Graxian pirates at your outer colonies, and what did you do? You negotiated with them, paid them off, gave them resources to leave you alone. We prevented unnecessary bloodshed, Haijin said quietly. You showed weakness. Krell slammed his clawed hand against the podium. The Graxians are a minor nuisance, barely worthy of notice, and you treated them like equals. You could have destroyed them icily, made an example of them, shown the galaxy that humanity cannot be threatened. Instead, you handed them supplies and asked them politely to leave. Vexter raised one of his limbs, calling for silence. The senator makes a valid point, though perhaps too forcefully. Ambassador Park. Ambassador Choi, you must understand our perspective. The galaxy is not a peaceful place. It never has been. Species survive here through strength, through the willingness to defend their territory with force. Your kind seems philosophically opposed to conflict. We are opposed to unnecessary conflict, Minho corrected. There is no such thing, another voice called out. All conflict is necessary. It is how we determine who is worthy to survive, who is worthy to thrive. Minho took a slow breath. 3 years of diplomacy had led to this moment. 3 years of humanity trying to prove themselves through peaceful means, through trade agreements, through cultural exchanges, through technological demonstrations, and none of it mattered. The council saw only what they wanted to see. Chancellor Minho said, "If I may address the council directly." Vexter gestured his approval. Minho turned slowly, looking at the assembled representatives. Humanity has existed as a unified species for less than 3 centuries. Before that, we were divided into hundreds of nations, thousands of tribes, countless factions. We fought wars that consumed entire continents. We developed weapons capable of destroying all life on our planet. We brought ourselves to the edge of extinction not once, but several times. He paused, letting that sink in. And then we chose differently. We chose to step back from that edge. We chose cooperation over destruction. We chose restraint over annihilation. Not because we were weak, but because we understood the cost of our strength. Pretty words, Krell sneered. But words are all you have. You speak of ancient history, of wars fought with primitive weapons. That means nothing here. Show us your strength now, or admit you have none. Vexter clicked his mandibles together, a sound that the translator didn't attempt to interpret. Ambassador Park, the Council has reached its decision. Your petition for membership is denied. Furthermore, we recommend that humanity remain in its current borders and focus on internal development for the next century. Perhaps then you will have matured enough to understand what is required to stand among us. You call us cowards, Hyjin said suddenly. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the murmurs that had started in the chamber. You look at our restraint and see fear. You look at our diplomacy and see weakness. You believe that because we choose not to fight, we cannot fight. Can you deny it? Krell challenged. Minho and Hyjin exchanged a look. They had discussed this possibility. They had planned for it. But actually doing it, actually saying the words out loud, felt different than planning in a conference room back on Earth. No, Minho said finally, we cannot deny your assessment. If the Council believes humanity understands only weakness, then perhaps we have been speaking the wrong language. Perhaps we need to speak in terms the galaxy understands. He straightened. His shoulders and his voice took on a formal tone that made several representatives lean forward. On behalf of the United Earth Government, I hereby formally declare that a state of war exists between humanity and the Galactic Council, effective immediately. The chamber fell silent. Completely, utterly silent. For nearly 10 seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. They simply stared at the two humans standing in the center of the floor. Then the laughter started. It began with Krell, a deep rumbling sound that shook his massive frame. Others joined in. Within moments, hundreds of species were laughing, the sound echoing off the crystalline walls in a cacophony of amusement. Vexer didn't laugh. He studied the humans carefully, his 4 eyes unblinking. You cannot be serious. Completely serious, Minho confirmed. You declare war against the entire Galactic Council? 300 species? Tens of thousands of worlds? Fleets that number in the millions of ships? Yes. More laughter. Louder now. Some representatives were standing, pointing at the humans, sharing the joke with their neighbors. Very well, Vexter said, and his tone carried enough authority to quiet the chamber again. If humanity wishes to prove themselves so badly, we will accommodate you. You have 1 standard galactic year to withdraw your declaration and submit a formal surrender. If you do not, we will dispatch a disciplinary fleet to Earth. Not to conquer, you understand. Simply to teach you the lesson you seem so eager to learn. 1 year? Minho asked. We are not unreasonable. We will give you time to reconsider this foolishness. Minho nodded slowly. 1 year. Understood. Is there anything else the Council wishes to discuss? The dismissal was clear. The humans were being given a chance to leave, to slink away and pretend this embarrassment had never happened. Vexer gestured toward the exit. Minho and Hyjin turned and walked toward the massive doors. Their footsteps echoed in the now quiet chamber. Every eye followed them. As they reached the threshold, Hyjin spoke without turning around. See you in a year, Chancellor? We look forward to it. The doors closed behind them, the corridor beyond, surrounded by the neutral security forces that maintained order in the council chambers. Hyjin finally allowed herself a small smile. Are we really doing this? She asked quietly. Minho touched the communication device in his ear, opening an encrypted channel to Earth. Yes. Send the activation codes. All of them. It's time to show them what humanity really is. The news reached Earth in less than an hour. Faster than light. Communication had its advantages, though right now Fleet Admiral Jiwan Li wished the delay had been longer. It would have given her more time to prepare for what was coming. She stood in the command center beneath Geneva, surrounded by holographic displays showing Earth's defenses, the positions of human vessels throughout the solar system, and most importantly, the activation status of protocols that had been theoretical until 17 minutes ago. President Yoon Ji-nam appeared on the main screen, broadcasting from the United Earth Government headquarters in New York. Her face was composed. But Ji-won could see the tension in her eyes. They had been friends for 20 years, long before either had reached their current positions. Gi-won knew every one of Yanji's tells. The declaration has been made. Yanji said. Ambassador Park transmitted the activation codes as planned. All major defense installations are receiving their orders now. How long until we're fully operational? 72 hours for the first wave, Giwan replied. 2 weeks for complete deployment. Shipyards beyond Neptune have been running at 30% capacity for the past 5 years. Bringing them up to full production now. The Council will detect the energy signatures eventually, but by then it won't matter. And the other preparations. Dr. Kang is standing by to brief you personally. His team has been ready for this moment since we first made contact with the Graxians. The screen split, and Dr. Sun Ho Kong's face appeared. The physicist looked tired, but his eyes were bright with the particular intensity that came from seeing years of theoretical work suddenly become very, very real. Madam President, he said, nodding. The weapon systems are ready. All 17 platforms. We've run the simulations thousands of times. They work. Explain it to me again, Yunji said. In simple terms, what exactly have we built? Sunho pulled up a display showing a sleek vessel, smaller than the massive dreadnoughts the Council species favored. This is our primary combat ship. We call it a Wraith-class frigate. It's 1/10 the size of a standard Council destroyer. But it's faster, more maneuverable, and most importantly, nearly invisible to their sensors. How? Yunji asked. We've been studying Council technology for 50 years, Sunho explained. Every ship they've ever built uses the same basic scanner array, the same detection frequencies. It's standardized across the entire galaxy because they all share technology. They think it makes them stronger, more unified, but it also makes them predictable. He zoomed in on the ship's hull. We developed a coating that absorbs those specific frequencies. To their sensors, our ships look like background radiation. Empty space. Nothing worth noticing. Guan stepped forward. It gets better. Their ships are built for direct combat. Massive armor, huge energy weapons, the ability to trade shots with enemy vessels for hours. It's how they've always fought, so it's how they expect everyone to fight. But we're not going to fight that way, Yunji said. It wasn't a question. No, Jiwan confirmed. We're going to fight the way humanity has always fought when facing a stronger enemy. We're going to be unpredictable. Fast. We'll hit them where they're weak, avoid them where they're strong, and make them question everything they think they know about warfare. Sunho brought up another display. These are our railguns. They fire tungsten rods at 30% the speed of light. The kinetic energy alone is enough to punch through any armor the Council uses. And because they're not energy weapons, they don't generate the heat signatures that Council ships watch for. By the time they detect the projectile, it's already hit them. What about our defense? Yunji asked. They will eventually find Earth. They will eventually bring their fleets here. That's where our second advantage comes in, Jiwan said. She pulled up tactical maps of the solar system. We've been building defensive platforms for decades. Every asteroid in the belt, every moon around Jupiter and Saturn, every seemingly dead rock floating in space, we've hollowed them out and filled them with weapons, sensors, and automated defense systems. She zoomed out, showing the sheer number of installations. Thousands of them, scattered throughout the system in what looked like random positions but was actually a carefully designed defensive network. The Council thinks in terms of fleets and planets, Guan continued. They mass their forces and attack in overwhelming numbers. But we've turned our entire solar system into a weapon. If they come here, they won't be fighting ships. They'll be fighting space itself. President Nam was quiet for a long moment, studying the displays. Finally, she spoke. How many people know about all this? Everyone in this room, plus the crews on the platforms and ships, Giwan said. Maybe 10,000 people total? We've kept it compartmentalized. Most of the construction was done by automated systems. Panicking, Youngji's chief of staff said, appearing on another screen. Social media is exploding. Half the planet thinks we've committed suicide. The other half thinks this is some kind of elaborate bluff. Oh, it's neither, Guan said firmly. This is what humanity does best. We adapt. We innovate. We find advantages, where others see only disadvantages. A new voice cut into the conversation. "Admiral, we have a volunteer for the first strike mission." Captain Doyan Shin appeared on a smaller screen. He was young, barely 30. But he had graduated top of his class at the Naval Academy and commanded one of humanity's new Wraith-class frigates. His ship, the Silent Moon, was currently stationed at the edge of the Kuiper Belt, fully armed and ready for deployment. Captain Shin, Ji-Wan acknowledged. "You understand what you're volunteering for?" "Yes, Admiral. Permission to take 30 ships into Drakkar space. We'll hit their shipyards at Kelvin 7, destroy their supply depots, and be gone before they know we were there." "That's deep in enemy territory," Yunji said. "If something goes wrong, we can't help you," Doyan smiled. It was the kind of smile that reminded Ji-Wan why she had fast-tracked his promotion. "Madam President, with all due respect, the entire galaxy is enemy territory now. Might as well start with the ones who called us cowards the loudest." Ji-Wan looked at Yunji, who nodded slowly. "Approved," the President said. "But Captain, this is more than a military strike. This is a message. We're showing them that their assessment of humanity was wrong. Make it count," did Madam President. "We launch in 6 hours." The screen went dark. Ji-Wan turned to Sunho. "What are his chances?" "If our technology works as designed, 90% success rate, if there are variables we haven't accounted for." Sunho shrugged. "That's why we call it war." President Yunji stood from her chair. In 90 minutes, she would address the entire planet. She would explain what had happened at the Council, why humanity had made this choice, and what it meant for their future. But first, she had one more question. "Admiral Lee, tell me honestly, can we win this?" Ji-Wan didn't hesitate. "If we were trying to conquer the galaxy? No. If we were trying to destroy the Council? Maybe, but at a cost that would make us no better than they are. But if we're trying to prove that humanity deserves respect, that our restraint was a choice and not a weakness, that we can defend ourselves against any threat." She smiled. "Yes, Madam President. We can absolutely win that war." In orbit around Neptune, hidden among the ice and rock of the outer system, the shipyards came fully online. Fusion reactors that had been running at minimal power for years suddenly flared to full capacity. Construction bays that had been empty filled with the skeletal frames of new ships. Automated systems began assembling weapons, installing armor, calibrating sensors. Humanity had spent 50 years preparing for first contact. They had hoped for peace, planned for cooperation, and dreamed of joining the galactic community as equals. But they had also remembered their history. They had studied their own wars, learned from their own mistakes, and understood one fundamental truth about the universe. Peace was always the first choice, but it was never the only choice. Captain Doyan Shin stood on the bridge of the Silent Moon, watching his crew run final checks on the ship's systems. In 6 hours, they would jump to Drakkar space. In 7 hours, they would prove that humanity's silence had never been weakness. It had been patience. And now, the galaxy would learn the difference. The Drakkar shipyards at Kelvin 7 had been operating continuously for 200 years. They orbited a gas giant in a system far from any disputed borders, protected by defensive platforms and a permanent fleet of patrol ships. Admiral Kyung considered it the safest military installation in Drakkar space. Nothing could approach undetected, and even if some fool tried, the automated defenses would tear them apart long before they got within weapons range. He was reviewing production schedules when the first alarm sounded. "Sensor contact," his tactical officer reported. "Multiple signatures bearing 037, distance 50,000 kilometers. Kyung barely looked up. Probably another merchant convoy dropping out of faster-than-light travel too close to the shipyards. It happened occasionally, usually from inexperienced captains who didn't understand proper navigation protocols. "Hail them and send them the proper approach vectors," he said, returning to his reports. "They're not responding, and the signatures are strange. Small, maybe frigate-sized, but the readings are inconsistent." Now, Kyung looked up. On the main display, 30 small dots appeared, spread across a wide formation. They were moving fast, accelerating toward the shipyards at velocities that seemed reckless. Pirates, someone suggested, this far into Drakkar space? Kung snorted. Likely. But send a warning anyway. Tell them to alter course immediately, or we'll open fire. The tactical officer worked his console. Several seconds passed. No response, Admiral. They're continuing on their current course. Impact with outer defense perimeter in 90 seconds. Then teach them a lesson. Defensive batteries, target the lead ship. Disable it. The massive plasma cannons mounted on the orbital platforms swiveled, acquiring their target. Energy built up in the firing chambers, and the first shot lanced out across the void. Bright enough to leave after images on the viewing screens, it missed. The small ship jinked at the last second, moving with an agility that Kyung had never seen from any vessel. The plasma bolt continued past it, dissipating into empty space. What was that? Kyung demanded. Sir, the ship changed course. Our targeting computer had a lock, but it moved too fast for the system to compensate. Then fire again. Saturate the area. They can't dodge everything. 20 platforms opened fire simultaneously. The space between them and the approaching ships lit up with plasma fire, creating a wall of energy that nothing could pass through. The human ships passed through it anyway. Captain Wayne Shin watched the plasma bolts streak past his ship on the tactical display. The Silent Moon's AI calculated trajectory predictions faster than any organic mind could process. Adjusting their course microsecond by microsecond to thread between the shots, all ships maintain formation, he ordered calmly. GA weapons status. Commander Ga Yoon checked her console. Railguns charged and ready. Target packages distributed to all ships. We have clean firing solutions on 17 primary targets. Taijin, how's our stealth holding? Lieutenant Taijuno smiled from his station. They still don't know exactly where we are. Their sensors are tracking our engine wash, but the hull coating is working perfectly. They're shooting at ghosts, and let's give them something real to shoot at. All ships, on my mark, go weapons hot. Fire everything. The 30 human ships dropped their stealth protocols simultaneously. For a fraction of a second, they appeared on every Drakkar sensor as clear, solid contacts. In that fraction of a second, their railguns fired. Tungsten rods, each weighing several tons, accelerated to 30% the speed of light. They crossed the distance to their targets in less than a second. The Drakkar defensive platforms registered incoming projectiles for approximately 10 milliseconds before the rounds hit. The impact was catastrophic. Kinetic energy converted to heat and force, tearing through armor that had been designed to withstand plasma fire and energy weapons, but had never been tested against pure, brutal physics. 17 platforms simply ceased to exist, their structures disintegrating into clouds of superheated debris. Ghost Protocol, now, Doyen ordered. The human ships cut their engines, killed every system that generated a detectable signature, and drifted on their previous vectors like dead hulks. To the surviving Drakkar sensors, they simply vanished. On the command ship, Admiral Kyung stared at his tactical display in disbelief. 17 platforms gone in a single salvo. The attacking ships had disappeared, and now his shipyards. The massive construction facilities that had been churning out warships for 2 centuries were completely exposed. Get me reinforcements, he roared. Activate the reserve fleet. Find those ships. Sir, we're trying, but our sensors can't locate them. It's like they're not even there. Ships don't just disappear. Scan for engine signatures, heat signatures, anything. His tactical officer worked frantically. Sir, I'm picking up something. Faint traces of ionized particles scattered across multiple locations. But the readings are degrading fast. Whatever they're using, it's incredibly efficient. Plot those locations and fire. If we can't track them, we'll kill every cubic meter of space where they might be. The remaining defensive platforms began firing in a pattern, saturating entire regions with plasma. It was wasteful, inefficient, and desperate. Q knew it. But what else could he do against an enemy he couldn't see? Then the second salvo hit. This time, the human ships targeted the shipyards themselves. 27 more tungsten rods, each one precisely aimed at a critical structural point. The massive construction bays, built to withstand the harsh radiation environment of deep space, crumpled under the kinetic assault. Sections that had taken years to build were destroyed in seconds. And still, the Drakkar couldn't locate the attackers. Hey, sir. Emergency transmission from the Council. They're demanding a situation report. Kyung's scales flushed with humiliation. Tell them we're under attack. Unknown enemy, using stealth technology we can't counter. Multiple casualties, extensive damage to the shipyards. Should I request assistance? Yes, and tell them to hurry, because I have no idea how to fight these things. Aboard the Silent Moon, Commander GA monitored their ammunition status. We're down to 40% on the railgun magazines. Recommend we break off and return to resupply. Doyen nodded. Agreed, Taijin. Plot a jump to the fallback coordinates. All ships. This is Silent Moon. Mission accomplished. We're going home, Captain GA said quietly. We're receiving a transmission. It's from the Drakkar command ship. On speakers. Admiral Kung's voice filled the bridge, translated into human standard. Unknown attackers, this is Admiral Kyung of the Drakkar Sovereignty. You have committed an act of war against our people. Identify yourselves and prepare to face the consequences. Doyen considered ignoring the transmission, but orders from Admiral Lee had been clear. This wasn't just a military operation. It was a message. Patch me through, he said. GA worked her console. You're live, Captain. Admiral Kyung, this is Captain Doyen. Shin of the United Earth's Defense Force. You wanted to know what humanity looks like when we stop being diplomatic. Consider this your first lesson, humans. This was you? Kyung's voice rose. You dare attack us? We will crush you for this. The full might of the Drakkar sovereignty will descend on your world. Maybe, Doyen replied, but not with ships built at Kelvin 7. Silent Moon out. He closed the channel and turned to his crew. Jump us out. Let's go home. The 30 human ships engaged their faster-than-light drive simultaneously. In a flash of distorted space, they were gone, leaving behind only wreckage and a very confused Drakkar admiral. News of the attack reached the Galactic Council within hours. Similar reports began flooding in over the next few days. Human ships had hit supply depots in the Vexter system. They had destroyed communications relays in neutral space. They had raided a military academy, downloading classified tactical data before vanishing. They had struck at 7 different Council species, always appearing without warning, always achieving their objectives, always disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. The galaxy had expected humanity to defend Earth, to wait for the Council's disciplinary fleet, and then surrender when faced with overwhelming force. Instead, humanity had gone on the offensive. They were fighting a kind of war that no Council species had ever experienced. Chancellor Vexter called an emergency session. The Council chamber, usually filled with the proud representatives of 300 species, now felt tense and uncertain. How is this possible? One representative demanded. They're a single planet, a single species. We are the combined might of the galaxy. Then why are we losing installations faster than we can defend them? Another asked, Senator Krell, who had laughed loudest at humanity's declaration of war. Was notably silent. Vexter clicked his mandibles together in frustration. We need to adapt. These humans fight differently than anything we've encountered. We need to understand their tactics, predict their movements, counter their stealth technology. With respect, Chancellor, a voice spoke up. It was Senator Kara, an avian species known for their strategic thinking. I don't think adaptation is our problem. I think our problem is that we're fighting their war. They're choosing when and where to engage. We're responding to their moves instead of making them respond to ours. Then what do you suggest? I suggest we stop trying to defend everything and start attacking what matters to them. We know where Earth is. Send the fleet there. Force them to come to us. Vexter considered this. Mobilize the assault fleet. Coordinate with all council members. In 1 month, we strike at Earth. Let's see how well humanity fights when defending their home. The order went out across the galaxy. The Galactic Council was done playing games. They were bringing the full weight of their power to bear on one small blue planet, and they were about to discover that humanity had been waiting for exactly this moment. 3 months into the war, the Galactic Council found itself in a position it had never experienced in its 300-year history. It was losing, not losing territory. Exactly. The humans weren't trying to conquer worlds or claim star systems, but they were systematically dismantling the Council's ability to wage coordinated warfare. Supply lines were cut. Communication networks were compromised. Fleet movements were predicted and countered before they could reach their objectives. And worst of all, no one could figure out how the humans were doing it. Fleet Admiral Jiwan Lee stood in the command center beneath Geneva, watching real-time intelligence feeds from across the galaxy. Her staff had grown from a few dozen to over 300, coordinating operations that spanned hundreds of light years. Every screen showed another success, another council installation neutralized, another enemy fleet forced to retreat.
Admiral.
We're receiving signals intelligence from the Vexter home system, a young analyst reported. It looks like they're calling another emergency council session. What's the topic? Us, Admiral. Specifically, how to deal with us. Giwan smiled. Patch it through. Let's hear what they're saying. The intercepted transmission was encrypted. Human code breakers had cracked council encryption algorithms within the first week of the war. It had been embarrassingly easy. The council species had been using the same basic security protocols for decades, never updating them because they assumed no one would dare spy on them. Chancellor Vexter's voice came through the speakers, translated into hum. An in-standard. This cannot continue. 20 star systems are now cut off from supply lines. For council members are demanding separate peace treaties with the humans. Our grand fleet, which was supposed to intimidate Earth into submission, is scattered across a dozen sectors trying to defend critical infrastructure. Perhaps if we consolidated our forces, another voice suggested, pulled everything back, created an unbreakable defensive perimeter, and abandoned half the council's territory. Krell's voice was bitter. That's not strategy. That's surrender. Then what do you suggest, Senator? Your people were the first to be attacked. Your shipyards at Kelvin 7 were destroyed in the opening salvo. What wisdom can the Drakkar offer? The silence that followed was telling. Krell had no answers. None of them did. The problem is that we don't understand how they're doing this, a new voice said. It was Senator Kara. Their ships are invisible to our sensors. Their intelligence network knows our plans before we execute them. Their tactics are unpredictable. We're fighting blind against an enemy that sees everything. We're also fighting with honor, another representative added. No civilian casualties. Every attack has been purely military or industrial. They're following rules of engagement that we don't even have. That's not honor, Krell snapped. That's psychology. They're trying to make us look like the aggressors. They want the galaxy to see them as the victims defending themselves, aren't they? Kara asked quietly. The transmission dissolved into arguments. Multiple species talking over each other, accusations flying, alliances fracturing. Juwan listened for another minute, then cut the feed. They're falling apart, she said to her second-in-command. The council has been stable for 300 years because everyone agreed on the basic rules. Strength matters. Conquest is acceptable. The strong dominate the weak. But we're breaking those rules, and they don't know how to respond. Should we press the advantage? Hit them harder? Jiwan shook her head. No, we've made our point. Now it's time for the next phase, which is... We remind them that we're not trying to destroy them. We're trying to change them. She turned to her communications officer. Get me Ambassador Park. Tell him it's time to go back to Axis Prime. Minho had expected the summons, but that didn't make it any less nerve-wracking. Walking back into the Galactic Council chamber where he had declared war 3 months ago felt surreal. The last time he'd been here, they'd been laughing at him. He wondered what their reaction would be now. Haijin walked beside him, her military uniform crisp and formal. She'd been coordinating with Admiral Lee throughout the campaign, and Minho knew she had insights into just how badly the council was struggling. The chamber was packed. Every species had sent representatives, but the atmosphere was completely different. No laughter. No casual conversations, just tense, watchful silence as the two humans walked to the center of the floor. Chancellor. Vexter looked older somehow, tired. His 4 eyes tracked the humans without blinking. Ambassador Park, he said, you have requested this meeting. Speak. Minho clasped his hands behind his back. I come with an offer. Immediate ceasefire. Formal apology from the Council for your initial assessment of humanity. Full Council membership with all associated rights and privileges. You come as a victor, demanding terms of surrender. Krell rose from his seat. We have not surrendered. We are not defeated. No, Minho agreed. You're not defeated. But you're also not winning. And you're starting to realize that you never will. Bold words for someone standing alone in a room full of his enemies. He-Jin stepped forward. Are we enemies, Senator? We've been fighting for 3 months. In that time, how many of your civilians have died? Krell hesitated. That's not the point. It's exactly the point. 0. The answer is 0. We've destroyed military installations, crippled supply chains, and demonstrated that we can strike anywhere in the galaxy without being stopped. But we haven't killed a single civilian. We haven't bombarded a single city. We haven't targeted a single hospital, school, or residential area. Because you're weak, Krell insisted. But his voice lacked conviction, because we're choosing not to, Minho corrected. But you need to understand something, Senator. All of this, everything we've done, has been humanity showing restraint. We've been proving a point, not fighting a war of annihilation. He pulled up a holographic display that showed tactical positions across the galaxy. Every Council species home world, every major capital, every significant military installation, and surrounding each one, blinking red dots. These are human assets, Minho said quietly. Ships, weapons platforms, strike teams. We've had them in position for the past month. We've been waiting, watching, holding fire. Every major world in the Council is currently within range of our weapons. Not just military targets. Everything, the chamber erupted, shouting. Accusations, demands for proof. Threats of retaliation. Vexter raised his limbs, calling for silence. It took several minutes, but eventually the noise died down. You're threatening genocide, the Chancellor said flatly. No, Minho replied. We're showing you what humanity could do if we actually wanted to fight a real war. This isn't a threat. It's a demonstration. We could have started this conflict by glassing your homeworlds. We could have killed billions in the first week. But we didn't, because that's not who we are. He closed the holographic display. You called us cowards because we prefer diplomacy to warfare. You mistook restraint for weakness. But here's the truth that you need to understand. Humanity doesn't avoid war because we fear it. We avoid war because we're exceptionally good at it, and we know what happens when we stop holding back. Pretty speech, Krell said. But if you're so powerful, why offer terms? Why not just conquer us? Because conquest isn't victory, Hyjin answered. Because we learned something from our history that you apparently haven't. Wars can be won on the battlefield, but peace can only be won through understanding. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We want to be part of it. Senator Kara stood slowly. I have a question, if I may. Minho nodded. During Earth's history, you mentioned that your species nearly destroyed itself multiple times, that you developed weapons capable of exterminating all life on your world. Is this true? Yes. And you chose to step back from that edge. To restrain yourselves? Why? Minho took a slow breath. Because we realized that the strongest civilizations aren't the ones that can destroy everything. They're the ones that can choose not to. Real strength isn't about how much damage you can inflict. It's about how much you can endure while still choosing peace. He looked around the chamber. You built your council on the principle that might makes right, that the strong survive and the weak perish. But what happens when someone stronger comes along? What happens when you're the weak ones? No one answered. Humanity is offering you a different path, Minho continued. Not one based on domination, but on cooperation. Not on fear, but on mutual respect. We can share our technology, our tactics, our strategic thinking. We can make the entire council stronger, more stable, more capable, but only if you're willing to admit that your assessment of us was wrong. Vexter was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke. And if we refuse? Then we continue as we have been, Hyjin said simply. We keep hitting your supply lines, disrupting your fleets, making it impossible for you to function as a unified council. Eventually, your alliances will fracture. Species will make separate peace treaties with us. The council will dissolve, and will negotiate with each species individually. Or Minho added, you could take the easier path. Admit you were wrong. Welcome humanity as an equal, and let us show you what we can build together. Chancellor Vexter looked at the assembled representatives. Some were nodding. Others looked furious. But even the angry ones couldn't deny the reality of the situation. They were losing, and everyone knew it. I call for a vote, Vexter said. All in favor of accepting humanity's terms. The vote wasn't unanimous. Approximately a third of the council voted against, but it was enough. The motion passes, Vexter said formally. He turned to Minho. The Galactic Council formally apologizes for our initial assessment. We acknowledge that we misjudged your species, and we extend an invitation for humanity to join the council as a full member with all rights and privileges. Minho bowed slightly. We accept. Hostilities will cease immediately. We'll begin withdrawing our assets from your space within 48 hours. And your technology? Your tactics? You'll share them? Yes, because that's what partners do. As the session ended and the representatives began filing out, Krell approached the two humans. His scales were a neutral gray, no longer showing aggression. I was wrong about your kind, he said stiffly. You fight better than I expected, No Hyjin corrected gently. We fight smarter than you expected. There's a difference. Krell considered this, then nodded slowly and walked away. Ambassador Kara was the last to approach. I'm curious about something, she said. Those assets you showed us, the ones surrounding our homeworlds, were they real? Minho smiled but said nothing. Kara laughed, a chirping sound. I thought so. Half of them were probably fake. But it doesn't matter, does it? Because we believed it? That's the real lesson you taught us today. The lesson is that the most powerful weapon isn't the one you use. It's the one you don't have to. 6 months after the treaty was signed, President Yoonji Nam stood before the first integrated session of the Galactic Council. It was a historic moment. For the first time in 3 centuries, the Council wasn't just discussing military matters or territorial disputes. They were talking about fundamental change. Humanity's seat in the Council was positioned directly across from Chancellor Vexter. It had taken weeks of negotiation to determine the placement, the protocols, the proper forms of address. But they had managed it. And now, Yoonji was about to deliver humanity's first official address as a full member. She looked around the chamber, taking in the hundreds of different species. Some watched her with curiosity, others with lingering resentment. A few, like Senator Kara, with something that might have been respect. Honored representatives, she began. I stand before you not as a conqueror, but as a partner. 6 months ago, humanity and the Council were at war. Today, we work together. This transition wasn't easy for either side, but I believe it was necessary. She pulled up a holographic display. Before humanity joined the Council, the average conflict between member species lasted 73 standard years. Wars were fought over territory, resources, and honor. Billions died. Entire worlds were devastated. And when the fighting finally ended, the underlying problems remained unresolved. The display changed, showing recent conflicts. In the past 6 months, since implementing human tactical doctrine and strategic thinking, the average conflict has lasted 9 weeks. Casualties are down by 97%. Economic disruption has been minimized. And most importantly, The solutions reached have been stable and lasting. How is this possible? A representative asked. Dr. Sun Ho Kong stepped forward. He had been invited to explain the technical aspects of what humanity was sharing. It's about understanding conflict differently. In traditional galactic warfare, UMass forces engage in direct combat and fight until one side is too damaged to continue. It's straightforward, but it's also incredibly wasteful. He pulled up tactical simulations. Human doctrine focuses on information, speed, and precision. Instead of destroying an enemy, we target their ability to fight. Supply lines, communications, command structures. Once those are disrupted, the conflict ends without massive loss of life. But doesn't that just delay the inevitable? Krell asked. He had been surprisingly engaged in the technology transfer process, perhaps trying to understand how his forces had been defeated so thoroughly. No, Sun Ho replied, because we also focus on addressing the root causes. Why are you fighting? What do both sides actually need? Often we've found that the resources being fought over could be shared, or that the territorial disputes come from misunderstandings rather than genuine incompatibility. Ambassador Hejin took over the presentation. We're also sharing our intelligence protocols. The ability to know what your opponent is planning, to predict their moves, to stay several steps ahead. This isn't just useful in warfare. It's useful in diplomacy, trade negotiations, crisis management. And you're sharing all of this freely? Vexler asked. You could charge enormous amounts for this technology. Your species could become wealthy beyond measure. We could, Yonji agreed. But wealth doesn't buy security. Stability does. A galaxy where conflicts are resolved quickly and efficiently is a galaxy where humanity can thrive. That's worth more than any payment. The presentation continued for hours. Human engineers explained stealth technology. Tacticians walked through case studies of recent conflicts resolved using human methods. Diplomats outlined new protocols for interspecies negotiations. Throughout it all, one theme remained constant. This wasn't about human superiority. It was about human experience. Earth had been at war with itself for thousands of years. They had made every mistake imaginable, learned every lesson the hard way. And now they were offering to share those lessons so others wouldn't have to repeat them. After the session ended, Yunji found herself approached by dozens of representatives. Some had questions about specific technologies. Others wanted to establish direct diplomatic channels with Earth. A few simply wanted to express their appreciation. Senator, Kara was among the last to approach. Madam President, I have a question. It's somewhat personal. Go ahead. When your ambassador declared war 6 months ago, were you certain you would win? Yunji considered the question carefully. Define win. That's not an answer. Actually, it is. If winning meant conquering the galaxy, then no. We couldn't have won that war. We're one planet against 300 species. But if winning meant proving that humanity deserved respect, that our way of thinking had value, that restraint was a choice rather than a weakness, she smiled. Yes, we were certain we would win that war. But you took an enormous risk. If the Council had responded differently, if we had struck at Earth with our full force immediately, then you would have learned why humanity built defensive installations throughout our entire solar system, Yunji interrupted gently. Senator, humanity has been preparing for hostile first contact since we first detected alien signals. We hoped for peace. We planned for cooperation. But we also prepared for war. When Ambassador Park declared war, it wasn't recklessness. It was calculated strategy based on decades of observation. Kara nodded slowly. We underestimated you. Yes, but that was our goal. Let you see what you expected to see until the moment we needed you to see the truth. Several weeks later, a new species arrived at the Council requesting membership. They called themselves the Rokon, and they were immediately concerning. Their representative was aggressive, dismissive of diplomacy, and openly contemptuous of what he called weak species who hide behind words. The council session, where the Rokon presented their case, was tense. They had a powerful military, advanced technology, and an attitude that reminded everyone of how the council used to evaluate species. Strength above all. Might makes right. Chancellor Vexter listened to their presentation, then looked around the chamber. The council will now vote on the Roken petition for membership. The vote was unanimous. Denied. The Roken representative was stunned. But we are strong. We have conquered 17 worlds. Our fleet is unmatched in our sector. That is precisely why you are denied, Vexer said calmly. The Galactic Council no longer values conquest as proof of worthiness. We have learned, somewhat painfully, that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to refrain from destruction when possible. This is because of the humans, the Roken representative sneered. They've made you soft, Minho stood from the human delegation. If you believe the council is soft, you're welcome to test that theory. I assure you it won't end well for you. Is that a threat? No, it's an observation. The council now combines the military might of 300 species with strategic doctrine that has proven devastatingly effective. You might have conquered 17 worlds, but you did it using traditional tactics against species who fought the same way. That won't work here. The Rokon representative looked around the chamber, perhaps expecting to see fear or uncertainty. Instead, he saw unified determination. The council had changed, and not just because humanity had joined. They had changed because they had learned. However, Hajin said, standing beside Minho, we're not simply rejecting you. We're offering an alternative. Humanity will send advisors to your worlds. We'll teach you what we've learned about conflict resolution, strategic thinking, and sustainable governance. Not as conquerors or overlords, but as teachers. When you've demonstrated that you understand these principles, when you've shown that strength and wisdom can coexist, you can petition the council again. And if we refuse your teaching, then you'll remain outside the council, Yunji said from the human delegation seats. You'll watch as the galaxy becomes more stable, more prosperous, more unified. And you'll realize that isolation is its own kind of defeat. The Roken representative stood silently for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. My government will need to discuss this offer. Take your time, Vexter said. But understand that the galaxy is changing. You can change with it, or be left behind. After the session, as the representatives filed out, Krell approached the human delegation. His scales were a warm orange, a sign of contentment among his people. I never thought I would say this, he admitted, but I'm glad you declared war on us. Why? Minho asked. Because you forced us to see ourselves clearly. For 300 years, we built the council on the principle that the strong survive and the weak perish. But we never asked what happens when strength alone isn't enough. Us. How does that intelligence, strategy, and restraint can be more powerful than any weapon? He gestured around the chamber. Look at us now. Species that were enemies for centuries are cooperating. Conflicts that would have lasted decades are resolved in weeks. The galaxy is more stable than it's been in living memory. And it's because you refused to accept our definition of strength. We didn't do this alone, Hyjin said. The council had to be willing to change. You could have refused. You could have fought until one side was destroyed. But you chose to listen, to learn, to adapt. That takes its own kind of strength. Later that evening, Yunji stood on a balcony overlooking Axis Prime's capital city. The view was spectacular. Thousands of different architectural styles blending together in a display of galactic diversity. Minho joined her, carrying 2 cups of earth-grown coffee. Thought you might need this. Thanks. She took the cup, savoring the familiar warmth. I keep thinking about what we've accomplished. 6 months ago, we were at war. Now we're reshaping the entire galactic order. Having second thoughts? No, but I am thinking about the cost. What if we had been wrong? What if the council had refused to change? What if they'd struck at Earth with everything they had? Then we would have defended ourselves, Minho said simply. And if we had lost, at least we would have lost fighting for something we believed in. The idea that restraint is strength, that wisdom matters more than firepower, that civilizations should be judged by how they treat others, not by how effectively they can destroy them. Yunji smiled. When did you become a philosopher? About 3 months into a war where I had to convince an entire galaxy that humanity's greatest weapon was the fact that we chose not to use our weapons. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the alien city below. Finally, Yunji spoke again. Do you think they really understand what we were trying to teach them? Some do. Kara definitely gets it. Vexter is learning. Even Krell, as much as he tries to hide it, has changed how he thinks about conflict. The others? Minho shrugged. They'll come around. Or they won't. But we've planted the seed. We've shown them that there's another way, and the Rokan. That new species? They'll be interesting to watch. My guess is they'll accept our offer. Not immediately, but within a few months. Because they'll realize that staying outside the council means staying in the past, and nobody wants to be left behind. Far away on Earth, Fleet Admiral Jiwan Lee was overseeing the decommissioning of the stealth weapons platforms that had been scattered throughout the solar system. They would keep some operational, of course. Humanity had learned too many hard lessons to completely disarm. But the majority could be safely powered down now. Captain Doyon Shin, promoted to Commodore after the Kelvin 7 raid, stood beside her in the command center. It's strange, he said. We spent decades building all this, preparing for the worst-case scenario, and now we're taking it apart. Not all of it, Yuan corrected. We're adapting, changing our focus from pure warfare to defense and peacekeeping. The galaxy needs what we can offer. Not our weapons, but our thinking. Do you think it will last? The peace. Yuan considered the question. I think we've bought ourselves time. Maybe a generation, maybe more. Conflicts will still happen. Species will still have disagreements. But now they have better tools to resolve those conflicts. And more importantly, they have an example of what's possible when you choose. Cooperation over conquest. The example of humanity. The example of what any species can become when they learn from their mistakes. Instead of repeating them, back on Axis Prime. The council session was ending. Representatives were filing out, already planning follow-up meetings, technology transfers, and collaborative projects. The galaxy was changing, slowly but steadily. Ambassador Minho Park was the last to leave the human delegation seats. He paused at the doorway, looking back at the massive chamber. 6 months ago, he had stood in this exact spot and declared war. Today, he was leaving as a full council member, representative of a species that had proven themselves not through conquest, but through restraint. Chancellor Vexter approached him. Ambassador, a moment of your time? Of course, Chancellor. I wanted to ask you something. During the war, when you showed us those tactical displays of human assets surrounding our worlds, was that real? Minho smiled. Does it matter? I suppose not. The threat worked whether it was real or not. That's the real lesson, isn't it? The most powerful weapon is the one you never have to use. Senator Kara said something similar. She's wise for her years. Vexter was quiet for a moment. Ambassador, I must admit something. When you first came to the council 3 years ago, I thought humanity was weak, naive, unprepared for the realities of galactic politics. I was wrong. You were acting on the information you had. The council had always worked a certain way. We challenged that, and you responded according to your experience. No one was wrong, exactly. We just had different perspectives. A diplomatic answer, Vexter observed. I'm a diplomat. It's what I do. Minho extended his hand, a human gesture that Vexter had learned to recognize. The past is the past, Chancellor. What matters now is what we build together. All. Vexter reached out with one of his limbs, grasping Minho's hand carefully. To the future, then. May it be wiser than our past? To the future, Minho agreed, as he walked through the corridors of the council building. Heading back to the human embassy, Minho allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They had done it. Humanity had taken its place among the stars, not through conquest or submission, but by proving that there was another way, a better way. The galaxy was learning, and humanity, after 10,000 years of hard lessons, was finally in a position to teach. It was enough.